Well, that road trip was something else, wasn't it? After a 4-game homestand winning streak, you go back on the road for 4 losses. The ups and downs of the season continue for the Calgary Flames. We're going to get into it and a lot more here today on the Red Mile Rundown. And welcome inside once again to another episode of the Red Mile Rundown, available wherever you get your podcasts and across your social media platforms as well. Don't forget to follow us at Red Mile Rundown. Another week of Flames hockey in the books. I am John Yusuf here to chat all about it alongside my co-host, Robert Munich. How we doing, Robert?
I'm doing pretty good. The Calgary Flames are not, after that pretty disastrous road trip. But no, things are going good for me. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's good. We're starting to warm up a little bit here. So we got one of those nice Southern Alberta Chinooks kicking in this week. So we're going to get nice slushy weather outside and looking forward to that mess out there. But it's good. It's been a good weekend. The Chiefs continue to win NFL games for me, continue to go on social media and get all the hate from other fans. So it's been fun. It's been a fun weekend. It's been good outside of the Flames hockey, of course. Why don't we dive into that Flames hockey, Robert? I don't know how much we have prepared here to talk about the week that was, but it wasn't pretty. What did you make of the Flames week that was?
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't great. They had a 4-game win streak heading into their 4-game road trip, and unfortunately, they weren't able to capitalize. And they were playing against some not great competition when you take a look at it. I mean, the Ottawa Senators have not been good this year. Detroit has been very mediocre. Columbus and Pittsburgh aren't great teams either. And the Flames are only able to get 1 out of a possible 8 points. So, they kick things off in Ottawa on the Amazon Prime Monday Night Hockey with a 4-3 loss. I thought the score made it look a lot closer than it really was. The Flames, they were out of that game early in the first period, and they weren't really able to get it back until late in the third. And then they head into Detroit, where Dan Vladar stands on his head. He was incredible in that game. Same can go for Connor Zary too. I mean, those two guys carried the Flames throughout that contest, but they ultimately lose 2-1 in overtime. And there was a controversial too many men call in overtime that I know a lot of Flames fans were kind of upset about. Did you think it was too many men, or did you think that they made the wrong call?
It was too many men by rule. If you go by rule, it was too many men. So I, at the time, if you go back to my social media, I thought otherwise, but you go back and you look from that behind the net view of that penalty call, it was the right call. And for Flame fans bemoaning the fact that we got quote unquote screwed there, go back to the Dylan Larkin penalty late in the third period that gifted the Flames a power play on the very seldom called face-off violation call. So Flames got a break, and then Detroit got a break. Just so happens that Detroit capitalized on their break last and won that hockey game. The Flames on those first 2 games of that road trip for me as well were the second best team. They were the second to pucks. They were second to a lot of situations, and they very much earned themselves both of those losses. And I think if it wasn't for Dan Vladar, they wouldn't have even gotten a point in those first 2 games. So you got to give credit to Vladar, for Zary for what they did, giving the Flames there. But as far as that overtime call goes, that was by rule the right call.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought Uyghur, he didn't do a good job of hustling to the bench. He didn't really take any strides, and he was out there for a while, like a solid second or two, kind of almost involved in the play a little bit. So I didn't have an issue with that call either.
The second Detroit turned that puck back up ice, you knew that was going to get called, because that's right back in the play. You got to have quicker changes at this, and especially at this point of the season. We're 20 some odd games into the season. How do you not have your changes down by now? Professional hockey players put a little bit of hustle in there, and then the guy coming off on the ice off the bench, you got to hold your horses up a little bit. You just got to wait, and unfortunately, if you get caught, lose a hockey game.
Yep. And then they head into Columbus and Pittsburgh on Friday and Saturday, and they get trucked in both games, 5-2 in Columbus with a couple garbage goals, as well as in Pittsburgh, a 6-2 loss. The Pittsburgh game in particular was really bad. I thought there was no emotion, no energy, no skill. Just, it was a very, very, very bad effort in Pittsburgh. And that sucked. I mean, that was the end of the 4-game road trip. You could tell the guys were just done. They wanted to go home. They got down early in that one, and there was just no way that they were going to come back in that game. So they go 0-3-1 on the 4-game road trip. It was not good. It was not pretty. And honestly, like, I don't know if you feel the same way, John, but like that's a road trip that I could see this Calgary Flames team coming back home to and being very disappointed and almost like second guessing if they are as good as their record indicates that they are, because they did lose to inferior competition. They got destroyed while doing it. And a lot of their guys just weren't going. Like, they weren't scoring goals. The defending was off. Even the goaltending wasn't very good, which has been good all year. I wonder if that's a loss that like really dampens the mood and almost, takes a little bit of confidence, takes a little bit of wind out of their sails heading into the rest of the season here. Do you think that's over exaggerating, or could that be kind of accurate?
No, I like that from you. That's well put. It's a road trip that you couldn't find a lot of positives, and I tried really hard to find some positives from that road trip, and I only found one. The power play continued to score goals. And that's the only thing I could come up with on this road trip that was a positive nature for this Calgary Flames team. You mentioned it. The goaltending was very other than the one performance from Vladar. You had very poor defensive structure to the hockey game. There was zero being created by the forwards 5-on-5. 5-on-5 on this road trip was the worst we've seen it all season, in my opinion. There wasn't one game where 5-on-5 they were the better team, the faster team. They were losing puck battles. You go look at the face-off percentages in that Pittsburgh game. It's disgusting. It's not good. So a lot of confidence was damaged on that road trip, in my opinion, and I can very much see them coming home, second guessing them. It's going to be an emotional game they're coming back to as well. So how do you go about now, if you're the Flames, mentally preparing yourself for a big game against the Columbus Blue Jackets, both emotional wise and on the ice wise, where you need to get yourself back on track? You need to get some points. You need to start playing better. There's a lot that goes into this game on Tuesday for the Flames, and that road trip did not help one bit for this Flames and their confidence here. And you saw it at practice today. A lot of line juggling. We got some call-ups. We'll get into that in a second here. And so you got to now hope that these guys are mentally strong enough that they can rebound here. We'll see what happens on Tuesday night, Robert.
Yeah, and then just like a couple more positives I'll add to it. I mean, I thought Connor Zary was pretty good throughout the road trip again. I know it didn't really result in great production, and actually, and when you take a look at his 5-on-5 stats, the Flames are outscored 5-1 when he was on the ice. But for me, the eye test, I think, overrides the numbers. I still thought he was really good on that road trip. And then the other thing I'll point out was just Martin Pospisil and Ryan Lomberg sticking up for their teammates in Columbus. That hit by Matthew Olivier, that was terrible. Like, what a dirty, just gross hit. And the fact that it went from a 5-minute major to a 2-minute minor was disgusting. I hated it. That is the exact type of hit that you want out of the NHL. And for them to go from a major to a minor on that, I thought was ridiculous. And good on Martin Pospisil for sticking up. He fought twice in that game. Good on Ryan Lomberg for stepping up, because, I mean, Olivier is probably the heavyweight champ of the league right now. And Lomberg, I think, was like 40 less pounds and, 3 or 4 inches shorter than him. I mean, he was going up against an absolute heavyweight tough guy. And he stood in there. He took some punches. He gave some. So good on those two guys for standing up for their teammates. I always think that's a sign of a close team. So, but outside of that, there wasn't much more to say about that road trip.
Yeah, that hit was bad. That hit was miscalled, in my opinion. I do love the Flames standing up for one another. We didn't see a lot of that last season. Seeing a lot more of that this year. I like it. And it just shows the heart that some of these guys have, that they're trying their hardest. They want to play for one another. It's a tough stretch right now with the results side and getting the points wise. But this team is still fighting up for one another, which shows they still care. And that's a big takeaway you can take away from these last couple of games. That game in Pittsburgh was so disheartening to watch that I almost didn't finish it. And I never turn off Flames games. I will watch to the end no matter what the score is. But that one was so disheartening that you just saw no fight back at all in the Pittsburgh game, and it was just disappointing to watch here. So now interested to see what happens this week coming up for the Flames. They've got Columbus coming in on Tuesday and a couple other games this week. Interesting to see how they rebound here. Robert, let's talk about those call-ups. The Flames call up both Jacob Pelche and Walker Duehr. What do you make of these call-ups?
I think they're coming at the right time. It kind of reminds me last season when they called up Connor Zary and Martin Pospisil, because in the month of October last year, the Flames were one of the worst teams in the NHL, couldn't create anything. They really needed some energy. They needed some new blood in their lineup. And I think they're kind of at a similar point right now, not quite to the same extent, but coming off that 4-game road trip where nothing happened and they were very uninspiring, playing very uninspiring hockey. I think they needed to inject some youth and just something different into the lineup. So I'm a huge fan of the timing of these call-ups. And right now, I mean, there's some veteran players that are underperforming, mainly Andrei Kuzmenko, who's looking like he's going to be the odd man out against the Columbus Blue Jackets, who he should be out of the lineup. He should be a healthy scratch because he's been terrible. He's been really, really bad, and he was awful on the road trip. So I like the fact that younger guys are going to come in and take his spot in the lineup for at least one game. I hope it's a longer audition than that, but overall, I'm pretty happy with the timing, and I like the two players that they called up as well. Duehr and Pelche have both been lighting up the AHL, two of the highest scorers in that league, so they both deserve it, and I'm excited to see what they can do tonight.
I want to hit on a couple of lines, but before we get there, Robert, I just want to ask your thoughts on Adam Klapka. He draws into the lineup because of the injury of Justin Kirkland, which is another story that we haven't mentioned yet. On the Flames lineup, he's been put on the IR. Adam Klapka comes in for a game, and now he's sent back to the AHL. What have you made of Klapka and the Flames' usage of the big man?
I don't think there's been a big enough sample size to really have like a strong opinion on his play so far this year. I'm okay with them sending him back down and letting him go to the AHL and try to find some success again. I don't like when they bring up guys like Klapka or say a Pelche, Coronado, Duehr and put them in the press box. I just don't think that makes sense. I'd rather see, if they're going to put a guy in the press box for a while, I'd rather see it be like a Dryden Hunt type of person, type of player who, is a veteran guy. He's not, there's not a lot of developing there for a guy like Dryden Hunt anymore. Whereas with some of the other guys I listed before, you want them playing games. You want them in the lineup. So I'm personally happy that they sent Klapka down. I want him to play games in the AHL. I think that's probably what's best for his development. And I mean, he really struggled in Pittsburgh. I mean, he was really bad against the Penguins. He didn't look like an NHL player. So I'm definitely okay with it. How about you?
Yeah, the up down for Adam Klapka this year has been a little interesting for me. I think putting him in the AHL and letting him play multiple games in a row and playing big minutes is, like you mentioned, good for his development. I like that assessment of, say you put a Dryden Hunt or a Kevin Rooney in the press box and let these guys play. We got to remember that Klapka hasn't been in North America all that long as well, so he's got to continue to learn how to play the game on the ice surface. So I like this decision by the Calgary Flames. If he's not going to play with the Flames, let him go play in the American Hockey, almost said Western Hockey League, the American Hockey League here, and let him get some confidence to his game. As for the lines, Robert, the one line that sticks out to me right away here is we've seen Backlund and Coleman get split up over the last little while here, and it seems like Coleman's been stapled alongside Connor Zary for the last few games. They shake up lineups again at Flames practice, but once again, Coleman and Zary are stapled together alongside Walker Duehr. I'm interested in that line, but speaking more just about the duo of Coleman and Zary together, what do you make of those two together and then being on a line and they're just kind of like following one another around? Because I really like this idea of putting Blake Coleman, a veteran, with a player trying to learn center at the NHL level.
Well, yeah, before I just dive into that, I'll just quickly go over the forward lines that they had at practice today, and which they'll probably be using tonight against the Blue Jackets. So they got Huberdeau, Kadri, Pospisil, which they finished with against Pittsburgh. They scored a couple goals in garbage time. Those are three struggling players right now. We'll see if those three can kind of come together and get themselves out of their slumps. Then you have Sharon Govich, Backlund, Coronado, which was by far and away the Flames' best line on that 4-game road trip. They were probably three of the guys who are actually going on this team. And then you got, like John just said, Coleman, Zary, Duehr. and then Jacob Pelche, Kevin Rooney, Ryan Lomberg, Andre Kuzmenko as the odd man out. So going back to Coleman and Zary, I don't know how I feel about it. To be totally honest, I want to see Coleman and Backlund together. I think those two guys should never be apart. I just think they work so well together. And then they also make the third person on their line successful. I don't know if there's ever been a guy that's been put with Backlund and Coleman who hasn't stepped up and played really well. So I really like those two as a duo. I'm not a huge fan of putting Coleman, Zary, and Dewar together. I want Zary to have more skilled and more talented line mates because Zary, he is the offensive driver of this team right now, which that's not a great for if you're the Calgary Flames because he's a second-year player. He's 23 years old, but he is their offensive driver, and he's a good playmaker, and he's a guy that carries the puck up the ice and makes plays. Don't you want him on a line with a guy like a Matt Coronado who can rip pucks, or a Igor Sharangovich who can rip pucks? I think that makes a lot more sense than putting him with two grinders in Coleman and Dewar. Because I mean, I know Coleman scored 30 goals last year, but he's not a 30 goal scorer consistently. He's more of that kind of 18 to 20 goal range. Walker Dewar is an AHL player in my mind. I don't like the line. I'll be totally honest. And on the road trip, I mean, that line got absolutely caved in at 5-on-5. Like I said, like Blake Coleman, when he was on the ice, the Flames got outscored 6-1 at 5-on-5. Connor Zary, the Flames got outscored 5-1 at 5-on-5 when they were on the ice. So the line didn't work on the road. I don't think it'll work again at home. I would like to see Coleman and Backlund back together, and I like to see Zary playing with better players. That's kind of how I see it. What are your thoughts on Coleman and Zary as a duo?
See, as a duo, I don't mind them if they have a shooter with them. And I agree with your assessment of having Backlund and Coleman together. They have been really good for years together, and they bring a lot of players along and that are very successful. But when you have a team right now struggling like the Flames are, I understand splitting those two guys up because your hope there is then you're going to get two separate lines going. The problem for me on that line is Walker Dewar, and no disrespect to Walker. He can come in here and provide some nice fourth line minutes if you ask him to. It's fine. I would have liked to see them put a scorer on that side with Connor Zary because your Coleman can be your net front guy, drives the net, does the dirty stuff, that stuff that a lot of guys don't want to do. And then you have your play driver in Connor Zary. I think those two can work well together if they have the right third member of that line. Sharangovich comes to mind. Heck, even Jacob Pelche is a better option, in my opinion, than a Walker Dewar on that line. So I don't mind it as much as you do, but I can understand where you're coming from as well, and I understand that argument as well. But I think right now we're looking at a coach who is quickly running out of options to try to get this forward group to get going, to produce any sort of offense, because it's not been one or two games we've been talking about this team 5-on-5 not being able to have offensively gifted players that make it easy to score goals. They're grinding these goals out, and to try to get these guys going, especially those not providing offense, Kuzmenko, not to mention any names, Kuzmenko, you want to try to get multiple lines going. So I understand why they've done it. I don't hate it. I just wish that Coleman and Zary had themselves a goal scorer with them. What about that top line for you, Robert? The Huberdeau, Kadri, Apostol combination. Very interesting. You can argue outside of Kuzmenko, those are your three most struggling forwards right now on this Flames group. What do you make of those three being put together? You do have goals from Huberdeau and Kadri coming in garbage time late in these hockey games they just had on the road trip. But what do you make of them now being put together on a line for the Calgary Flames this week?
To me, it's just Ryan Huska saying, Huberdeau, Kadri, Pospisil, you guys are not playing good hockey right now, so we're just going to throw you together, and we're going to put together everyone else who's kind of going right now. It'll be interesting to see how he deploys them. Are they going to have the most minutes at 5-on-5? Are they going to start, nearly most of their shifts in the offensive zone? Who are they going to play against? Those are kind of the questions I'm interested in seeing because, in my opinion, I would say that's almost like their third line right now. Just with the way those three have been playing, they've all struggled mightily. I know that they picked up a couple goals against Pittsburgh, but I mean that game was over. It was completely over by the time they were scoring those couple goals. But hopefully, it's just a way to spark them. Ryan Huska's tried everything with Jonathan Huberdeau this year and last year. Nothing's worked. So maybe trying him back with Nazem Kadri, maybe they'll spark him. Maybe there's a newfound chemistry or connection there. I don't know, but to me, it's just 3 guys really struggling right now. Throw them all together and just see what happens. That's kind of the way I see it.
I have to laugh a little bit when we talk about Huberdeau and about getting him going. And I had someone come to me, they're like, but he leads the team in goals. And I'm like, is that how good Huberdeau's been, or an indictment on the offense? And what the Flames have been providing right now offensively for this group. I like these guys being put together for one reason and one reason only. It's kind of like Ryan Huska for me says, here you guys go, figure it out. You're the veterans, figure it out. Oh, and here's Pospisil beside you. He can help you out. So I like this. This is a figured out moment for both Huberdeau and Kadri. They need to provide something before a game's out of hand, before the game only has 3 minutes left to go in the third period. They need to provide something in the first period, and they need to provide something for this team to lead them forward. If this Flame team wants to sniff the playoffs, the kids have been a nice story, but they're not going to get to the playoffs or have any success around the playoffs without Kadri and Huberdeau bringing some sort of positive influence to this Flames lineup. So I like them being put together for that fact. Go and figure it out. You two are veterans. Figure it out, and let's move forward with this lineup. It'll be interesting to see. What do you make of Backlund being put between 2 goal scorers? So he's known as your two-way center. He's your captain. He's your leader. He takes on all the toughest matchups from the other side, but in this instance, he's put between Coronado and Sharangovich, 2 guys that can absolutely rip the puck, can create playmaking, and can find a finish. What do you make of Backlund being the center for those 2 guys?
I mean, they were great. Like, that line was phenomenal during that last road trip. When you just take a look at some of their numbers at 5-on-5, like, they were not on the ice for a goal against. Now, they were on the ice for only 1 goal for, but taking into consideration how many goals the Flames let in on that road trip, that's actually pretty impressive. Like high danger chances, like when Michael Backlund was on the ice, were 11-5 for the Flames. The shot attempts were 69-33. Like that, those 3 guys were really, really good. So, when you take that into consideration, maybe it makes sense, but I'd way rather see Michael Backlund in a defensive role. Like, my ideal lines for the Flames right now, when you take in consideration Pelche and Dewar on the team, I'd love to see a line of Pelche, Backlund, Coleman. I think that would be super interesting. I think it'd be really good defensively, and there could be a little bit of offensive upside, a little bit of speed. And then you could put Sharangovich, Zary, Coronado, 3 offensively inclined players, have Zary down the middle making plays to 2 shooters, and then you have a 4th line of Lomberg, Rooney, and Walker Dewar. I think that makes a lot of sense for this team. I don't like Backlund in that offensive role. You take a look during the month of November, he only had 5 points in 15 games, which is less than a 30-point pace. He's 35 years old. He's not a 50-point guy anymore. He's not an offensive guy. So I don't know why they're using him in that role, to be completely honest. I'd much rather see Zary playing with shooters. So like I said, I mean, I just think it makes so much sense to have Backlund and Coleman together. Give them the hardest minutes. Give them the hardest matchups. Don't try to make Michael Backlund a player he's not. Use Michael Backlund to his strengths, and that's playing defense, that's being a penalty killer, and that's shutting down the other team's best players. So I don't like him necessarily with Sharangovich and Coronado long term, but it's what Ryan Huska's going with right now.
Well, it's working on that road trip, as you just mentioned, so maybe that's why I stick with it. I'm with you on that, though. I love those lines you just put out there. There's not a lot of pop on those 3 lines, but you got to play with the cards you have right now.
Well, Zary Sharangovich Coronado is pretty interesting, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I quite like that. If you can give them some offensive zone starts and try to find some softer matchups to let them get some confidence together, that the line can really roll. And you got to remember that both Zary and Sharangovich are much better defensively than a lot of people give them credit for. So I think they could hold their own as well defensively if, say, a shift goes the wrong way for them. So I think that's a very interesting trio. These lines at practice, if you just flipped Backlund and Zary, the lines, I would be absolutely happy and ecstatic with these lines based on what we've seen from the Flames this year and what you're hoping to get out of these guys offensively / defensively as well. So I think the move that a lot of Flame fans are been clamoring for, been wanting, been calling for. You've seen the social media posts, I'm sure, Robert, as well. It looks like we're going to finally get an Andrei Kuzmenko press box visit. What do you make of him being the 13th forward at practice?
Well, I mean, I think it makes nothing but sense. Kuzmenko has been really, really bad, especially in the month of November. I mean, you pointed this out yesterday on social media. Dustin Wolf has the same amount of assists as Andrei Kuzmenko. He has the same amount of points as Andrei Kuzmenko in the month of November. That's crazy. And then, I'd put out that insane. Him and Kevin Rooney had the same amount of points. And that's no disrespect to Kevin Rooney, but it's just like Kuzmenko's played 30 minutes on the power play. Rooney's played less than 2. Kuzmenko's in the top 9 in a scoring role, playing with Nazem Kadri. Kevin Rooney's on a 4th line, yet they have the same amount of points. Kuzmenko has been the biggest disappointment from a Flames perspective this year, from like an individual player, and I don't even think it's close, which is too bad because, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. I mean, going into the season, you and I had very high expectations for him. He's got all the skill in the world. He's got all the talent in the world, but he just hasn't been able to put together. And the one interesting thing is, you and I consistently, like almost every episode, we continually talk about how Andrei Kuzmenko's skating is holding him back. And if you take a look at the NHL Edge stats, where they put the chips in the players' jerseys, they're able to track their speed bursts and their top speed, a bunch of different sort of skating stats. Andrei Kuzmenko is in the bottom 8 of the NHL in major speed categories. So top speed, 3rd slowest player in the NHL. Speed bursts above 18 miles per hour per 60 minutes. He's the 8th worst skater in that category. Speed bursts above 20 miles per hour per 60. He's the 5th worst skater. So he's literally one of the worst skaters in the NHL among forwards this season. And I think both you and I have been noticing that. Like, there's no separation speed. He can't get open. He can't put himself in positions to shoot because he can't skate, which is totally bizarre because we didn't see that from him last year. So it makes you wonder, is he hurt? Did he come into training camp out of shape? Like, what the hell is going on with this guy? Because we've seen him be an elite dominant player, and then this year he looks nothing like it. So it's totally bizarre. He deserves to be in the press box. I think the Flames are making the right choice there.
When you were listing off those stats, the one name that came to my mind was, is he talking about Pat Maroon?
Pat Maroon's ahead of him in all of them.
And I was just about to say that. I saw that Pat Maroon has faster speed burst than Kuzmenko. I'm like, what is this?
So, Maroon's the worst in that regard in like every category. Him and Jason Robertson, surprisingly, but Kuzmenko is very close to Patrick Maroon.
It's just like, if you put those two in an ice race, it'd probably be a closer race than you'd think. Like, it's baffling for me. The one stat that I found, and I think it's actually changed now. When I looked it up a couple of days ago, Kuzmenko 5-on-5 amongst forwards for the Flames is 12th in shot attempts. 12th. Another manager, there's only been 14 forwards played for the Flames this year, and he's 12th in shot attempts. Kevin Rooney has more shot attempts. Ryan Lomberg has more shot attempts. It's not great from Kuzmenko. And so the one thing I will say here, because I don't want to just keep bashing on the guy, is he's earned himself this visit to the press box. And I don't know if this is going to be a wake-up call, because Rick Tocchet tried this last year multiple times in Vancouver with this guy. I don't know if it's going to be a wake-up call for him. What I think will help is, with him not being on the ice, other guys who are going, who are skating, who are trying to do these shooting attempts are inserted into the lineup. You watch Pelche and Dewar and their numbers in the AHL. They are miles better when we saw from Kuzmenko at the NHL levels. Hopefully that translates for both of those guys, that they can be an effective forward on this Flames roster, forward-wise.
Yeah. Can I add one thing about Kuzmenko?
Yeah, go ahead.
The thing with him is that he is a very streaky player. So, like, when you go back to his first season in Vancouver, from the start of the season until the time they hired Rick Tocchet, he was like an elite point producer. Like, I believe he was over a point per game during that time. Helps when you're playing with a guy like Elias Pettersson. But regardless, he was a dynamic offensive player. Then they hired Rick Tocchet. The offense completely fell off, eventually leads to a trade. He comes to Calgary. He's not great in his first few weeks as a Flame. Takes some time off, comes back, lights the league on fire. He's literally a top 10 scorer for the last 11 games of the season. So he goes on a roll there. And then this year he starts the season very slow. Can he find a way to get that skill back, to get that scoring back like he has in the past? He's done it multiple times where, you know, he's been really good. He's been a top tier NHL player, dips down to being literally a healthy scratch type of player, back up to being a first line player. Like the swings of momentum with this guy are insane. So quite honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if at some point this season he's able to get that sort of offense back in his game. But so far, it has definitely not happened. And I do think he definitely deserves to be in the press box for at least a few games.
The second this guy scores 3 goals in 4 games, trade him. Like quick before he gets cold again. Jeez. What a disappointment he has been so far this season. The defensive pairings really haven't changed all that much, Robert. Not that I'm expecting big changes, but are you surprised that it's just a continuation of Bean or Hanley coming in to play alongside Pahal, or is there anything that you'd actually like to see changed among these defensive pairs? Because it continues to be Ball and Anderson, Miramanoff and Uyghur, and then you have Pahal with one of the other guys. Any changes you make on that defensive group? Or are you liking what you're seeing from those 6?
I personally like what I see from them. The only change I would make is consistently putting Jake Bean in the lineup ahead of Joel Hanley. I wrote about this at Flames Nation last week, where I did a deep dive into the numbers and eye test and tried to see who's been the best fit with Braden Pahal on that third pair. And it has been Jake Bean by a pretty wide margin. I know they weren't great together in Pittsburgh, but the whole team was bad that night. But I really think Bean and Pahal make up a pretty solid third pair in the NHL. I want to see those two guys get an extended look together. Stop putting Barry in. Stop putting Hanley in. Those guys are good veterans. They'll take it. I think, you know, with Jake Bean, he's a little bit younger. He's got a little bit more upside. He's signed into next season. I think the Calgary Flames coaching staff should try to make it work with Jake Bean instead of putting in Joel Hanley and Tyson Barrie. But the other top 2 pairs with Ball and Anderson, I mean, they've been really good all year. Uyghur, Miramanov have really turned it around. They were really solid in the month of November. So I think you want to keep those 2 together. And then I really think if you keep Bean and Paul Hall there, that makes up a decent defense group. Don't get me wrong. It's when you compare it to some others around the league, it's not great. But I think it makes up a pretty average, sort of mediocre group when you compare it to other NHL teams, which is fine for where this Flames team is right now. So I'm not a huge fan. Would you split up any of those pairs?
No, I want the consistency. I like the consistency of the top 4, and I want to see the consistency on that third pair. Just get those guys familiar playing with one another, and I think Bean and Pahal, those skill sets, once they learn and start to be comfortable with one another, I think that'll become a very fine third pair in the National Hockey League, one that you can rely on, because we've been raving about Pahal all year long. If you can just get someone to play alongside him that's good enough, then I think he'll be able to settle in his game, maybe even a little bit more here. I really like that. The last one for me on the lineups, and I'll throw it over to you if you have anything left, is the Flames reached out to Guy Gaudreau. He was a full participant at Flames practice on Monday, skating with the guys, chatting with the guys, and you saw the videos and the pictures from the Flames practice. Awesome to see him smiling again. Having a good time with the Flames players, and good on the Flames for having him out before the game on Tuesday to be with those guys and to help them run practice. So just a feel-good story ahead of what we're going to see Tuesday night when the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Flames play. Just a really nice touch from the Flames to have Guy Gaudreau part of their practice. Robert, anything from you on the lineups before we move on here?
No, I mean, I would just totally agree with you. I mean, what a classy move by the Calgary Flames to do something like that. I think that's awesome. You know, you saw the Philadelphia Flyers do that with John Tortorella. They invited Guy out there. I think Guy's been on the ice with the Blue Jackets this year as well. So that's super cool for them to do that. He's going through such a difficult time in his life right now. So anytime that there can be some sort of positivity or some sort of way for him to get away from the reality of what's happened is awesome. And yeah, I mean, the Flames, they deal with this kind of thing really well. And I'm interested to see, you know, what type of ceremony or if they have any plans to retire Gaudreau's number or put a banner in the Saddle Dome. Be interesting to see what they have in store for that type of situation tonight.
We do know from multiple reportings that there's going to be some sort of ceremony tomorrow night before, or I guess Tuesday night. I guess when you guys listen to this, will be pregame. So if you're going to the Dome, be prepared for that, and hopefully the TV will let us watch it in its entirety, which I'm sure they will. So it'll be awesome here. Robert, we've been talking a lot about Flames this year, a lot about what we'd like to see from the Flames this year, but we kind of wanted to expand that conversation to a bigger look here. As we were chatting before the podcast and over the last couple of weeks here, we wanted to talk more of a bigger picture of the Calgary Flames. There's a lot of talk online about being team tank, or should this team be playoff chasing, or what should the Flames do here? We saw some reports from Darren Dreger put some stuff out. Other news outlets have put some stuff out here. So let's have this conversation about the Flames a little bit long term. Where do you want to start with this conversation yourself here?
I guess it's just been such an interesting thing to watch on social media. There's a faction of the fan base, like you said, that's team tank. They want high draft picks. They want to draft elite talent, and they're okay with having a few losing seasons to do that. And then there's the other group of fans who it's like win at all. Not win at all costs, but like be competitive. Stick to a long-term plan, but don't necessarily tank. Try to compete for a playoff spot. Don't worry if you lose your first-round pick to Montreal. And it seems like there's only two teams in terms of the fan base right now, which side of the fence you're on. So I just found it really interesting. But like, maybe I'll just throw a question to you. Like, what ultimately, what do you want to see out of this retool rebuild from the Flames? Like, what exactly do you want this team to look like a few years from now? And what sort of plan do you think they need to get there?
That's a great question. It's a question that can be taken a lot of different ways. For me, the approach is interesting because there's definitely a few ways to go about how you build a team, how you create a team. And I think the Flames need to have always approached it where they like to see the revenue as well. So you got to remember what we'd like to do and what the Flames want to do are going to be probably different things, because we all know who Murray Edwards is. At the end of the day, this is all about finding a team that can be competitive long-term, a playoff team long-term with the ability to challenge for Stanley Cups as well while they're being a competitive group. So for me, that's the direction that the Flames are going to try to go in. We've heard Craig Conroy talk about that's what he wants. He wants sustainability as a playoff team, one that can be competitive and challenge for Stanley Cups. And how you build that, there are so many examples of a way that a team has done it, and then versus another team has done it a different way, versus another team has done it a different way. We've seen teams bottom out and find success. See teams bottom out and find zero success. Look at the Buffalo Sabres. We've seen teams just rebuild on the fly. We saw Pittsburgh Penguins reload over and over and over, and they got 2 Stanley Cups out of it. So there's a lot of different ways to build a franchise. And so for the Flames, for me, the goal has to be long-term sustainability and as a playoff team. These one and dones that we've seen the Flames do, 2015 comes to mind, where you find a little bit of success and then you start chasing it again. That's the part for me that needs to stop. So whether your team tank or your team let's go get a playoff spot, I think both sides should agree that at the end of the day, being a long-term sustainable franchise is the end goal here. And there just isn't a blueprint of going about it one way or the other that makes you more successful than the other. I'll throw that same question back at you, Robert. Where do you think the direction of this team should be going here? Your end goal for this Flame team?
Well, I think like whenever I think about this, the things I want for the Flames in the future is I want this team to go on like a 5 to sort of 8 year run where they are guaranteed to make the playoffs. And maybe in a few of those years, you go on a little bit of a run, but for about 5 to 8 years, you give yourself a legitimate shot to go deep in the playoffs. And because I don't think it's realistic to think that this franchise can become the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they win multiple Stanley Cups and they win multiple division titles and they have Art Ross trophy winners and Norris winners. Like, I don't know if that's realistic. What I want is a team, like I said, 5 to 8 years where they have sustained playoff success. And then within that group, I want a core group of players 2 to 4 guys, for example, who are elite NHL players. Like when you take a look around the league at some of like the better cores, I want a Matthews, Marner, Nylander. I want a McDavid, Draisaitl. I want a McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen. I'd love to have a group of 2 to 4 elite players who are superstars around the league that get you super excited to watch Calgary Flames games, that put the Flames on a bit of a national stage, put them, on ESPN and TNT, put them in more Hockey Night in Canada games.
Yeah.
That's like what I want to see from the Flames. So I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, how do you do that? And, I wrote an article last year for Flames Nation where I went back and I put together I think it was the 40 or 50 best players in the NHL in my mind. And I saw how each team acquired those players. And it was something along the lines of 60 to 70% of those players were picked in the top 10 of the draft. So in my opinion, you have to pick multiple times in the top 10 in order to get that core group of players. It's very rare you can make a trade for them. It doesn't happen in a free agency. It doesn't happen with offer sheets. You have to draft them. So I'm okay with the Flames bottoming out for a couple years. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to, take it down to the studs. But I do think over the next, 2 to 3 years, I think they should be picking in the top 10 each time. Do you think I'm out to lunch on that? And, when it comes to this franchise, do you think they'd even be willing to do that? Because it doesn't feel like it with Murray as owner, right?
I like the key for me of what you said there is top 10. I don't think Murray has the upside to bottom out to take it to the studs. And we've both seen that over the course of the time he's owned this team. We've heard that from Craig Conroy, where it's kind of a hybrid rebuild where they're gonna put out some kids, they're gonna play some guys, and they're not gonna be good enough to win 50 hockey games a year. And so you're gonna inevitably be picking in that top 10. That's where you get a Zane Parekh from. That's a start of a build for me. And so I think that this team will have enough patience to do that for a couple of years, but then I think they've got to have it turned around real quick here to appease the ownership. The one thing that
do you actually see them doing that? Because all the reports right now are that Craig Conroy is looking for, a top 6 center who's a younger player. Darren Dreger had mentioned that if the Flames are in the playoff mix, that they might be one of the players at the deadline. To me, it feels like Conroy's trying to, retool this as quickly as possible. And I don't think there's any patience whatsoever from ownership to do this for another 2 to 3 years. That's the part that concerns me with this organization is they're very impatient. And I think because of that, it's going to keep them in the mushy middle forever. That's just what it feels like to me.
Perfect. And you led me exactly where I was going to go, though, too, Robert. So this Flames team coming into this season on paper was not good enough. Everyone knew that it was not good enough. Last year, they were not good enough. So there you go. There's your 2 years, maybe a third year next year, where this team wasn't going to be all that great on paper. You're going to be drafting in that top 10 range on paper. And so what the Flames have done, though, this year is they put themselves in a situation where they're in a playoff spot. And this is what scares me about Murray Edwards. And I think why we're getting those reports from guys like Darren Dreger about the Flames, quote unquote, being aggressive is because Edwards sees that a little bit of success. There we go. We've done it. We got our couple of guys we needed. We've done it. Let's go get a playoff spot here. We saw that after 2015, where the Flames caught lightning in a bucket there with a Gaudreau and a Monahan who were just turning it, came into form, playing really well, and you had that young core really performing above what they should be performing at, and you saw a little bit of success, and you saw Murray Edwards put that mandate in there. Hey, Brad, we have to go win, and you started chasing it again. So this is where this conversation is going to take us now, Robert. Is we see the Flames trying to chase it again. And that's what I'm scared of when you hear these reports of, hey, we're looking for a young center. Hey, we want to be aggressive if we're in a playoff spot. I don't understand why they won't take the extra time here. What's wrong with being a bottom 10 team this year and next year? You see the loaded couple of top ends of the draft coming with your Michael Misas, your Roger McQueen's coming this year, your Haggins, you got McKenna on tap next year. A couple other kids coming up next year as well in the 26th draft that'll be very special players. Are you scared that these reports now are going to be Murray saying we got to chase this now? We found our success. We found our guys. Now we got to be a playoff team. That's where I'm at personally. I guess maybe scared might be the wrong word, but I've seen this before, and it's just history for me is repeating itself over and over again.
Yeah, it's just the one thing I'd ask like a guy like Murray Edwards is like, don't you want your fans to watch elite players? Like, don't you want a Gavin McKenna on your team? Don't you want that guy who you can build your franchise around?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to play for your team for 15 to 20 years? Who's going to have his number raised to the rafters? Who is going to be must-see TV? Like, don't you want that? And the only way to do it is to bottom out for a few years and give yourself a chance at a top pick. Because I think what they're doing right now in being in the mushy middle is they're just going to end up acquiring a bunch of like solid third, second line, maybe even like a third member of a first line type of players, or, defensemen like kind of 2 through 4 in your lineup. You're going to end up just acquiring a whole bunch of those guys, and it's going to keep you in the middle. It's going to keep you mediocre. You're not going to have any upper end talent that's going to be able to get you over the edge and get you over the hump into becoming an elite team. Like, when you take a look at this Flames organization right now, who in this organization can you say is like, okay, this guy has the potential to be an elite player? Like, I'm not just talking about like a really good player on the team, like a guy like maybe a Matt Coronado, but like I'm talking like you look around the NHL, like this guy's making Team Canada, this guy's making Team USA. He's a superstar. The only guy that really comes to mind for me right now is Dustin Wolf. I know people are going to say Zane Parekh. I still have questions about Parekh in terms of being a legit NHL superstar. The only guy I see right now is Wolf. Outside of that, and honestly, with goaltending's so up and down. Wolf's not even a guarantee to be that type of player. But then you take a look at other guys like Coronado, could be a 20 to 30 goal guy. That's great. Not elite. Connor Zary could be a nice second line center. Not elite. Could Pelche be a top 9 guy? Sure. Stromgren, Battaglia, Basha, those guys all to me seem like good support players, but not the guys. And the Flames need to draft and acquire like the guys, the 2 to 3, 4 guys who you can build your organization around to have long-term success. The only way you do that is near the top of the draft. And if they continue to go the direction that they are and trying to be as competitive as possible every single year, they're going to be stuck in the middle, and we're going to be stuck watching a boring team with no superstars. And I think that sucks. And I think a lot of Flames fans think that sucks too. So I don't really like the direction they're going in right now, to be totally honest with you.
And to further your point there, if you go back to what I was talking about, the 2015 season, the next year, we ended up watching guys, and this is right off the roster, Lance Boma, Joe Colburn, Turner Elson, Derek Englund, Michael Furlan, Michael Frolik, Marcus Granlund, Derek Grant, Freddie Hamilton, Garnet Hathaway, Kenny Agostino, and Nicholas Backstrom ended up being a backup goaltender that year. Those were players that we actually watched after the Flames decided they were going to start chasing playoff success after one season. To your point, a bunch of third liners that we're hoping could catch that 2004 Magic again. I don't understand. I like your point as well, where you're talking about, does Murray Edwards not want that guy to build his franchise around? Does he not want a Naginla again in this roster? Jerome Naginla was a guy they brought in and they built around, and they built a franchise around. And for years, you could see why they were trying to win hockey games with Jerome in-house. And they go get Kiprusoff, same thing. Not saying we're going to find ourselves a Jerome Naginla 2.0, but that's what you hope to draft when you draft these high-profile players that come into your organization, to your point, and make it exciting for fans to go to the arena. You're getting a new rink in a couple of seasons. Do you not want something to help you make that special? Or do you just want another mediocre roster? This I need my playoff revenue stance that he has. It's always been so weird to me, because you can get longer and better revenue with a more sustainable competitive hockey team. That's through bringing in guys like McKenna, Michael Misa, James Hagan. Pick your poison. Pick your guy that you really like in the next couple of drafts at the top of those drafts. Those are guys you can build around. There's a Joe Aginla coming up in a couple years in the draft. Heck, maybe he's Joe Aginla 2.0. But it comes down to the one thing for me, and that's sustainability. I thought, and what we've heard from Craig Conroy, I thought that's what we were headed to. And you heard my old podcast, I would talk about it a lot. There's a vision in place from Craig Conroy. You hear it from Craig Conroy. I just hear these reports, though, the Flames might be aggressive or looking for this, looking for that. You have this draft capita. You have these young players. Use them, develop them, make something special. So when you go into that new Scotiabank arena, that you have a special group that these fans are going to be drawn to, that they're going to be wanting to watch. And that's going to help your bank account, Mr. Edwards, grow more and more and more, because they're going to be excited to watch these guys. I don't know how many people, when I read that list of players off, got excited and have fond memories of the 2016 or the 2017 season. I, for one, don't have any great memories of those two seasons, because for me, that was just, again, the Flames doubling down and chasing what they thought they had. We saw that more over and over again. Just once, I just like him to take a step back, let Craig Conroy go through this 3 to 5 year plan and create himself a team that's going to be competitive for more than just one season. One and dones are never fun, ever. They're fun for that one season, and then you have to remember, okay, now we're back to the slog again. Nothing drains a guy more than watching second line Lance Boma or first line Joel Colburn going out there and pretending to be an NHL caliber player.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost the direction we're headed, right? They want to be competitive, so they're going to end up filling their roster with decent players, like, good players, but they're going to miss that elite talent. And, the thing with that 15 group is that they did kind of have elite talent in Mark Giordano, who probably should have won the Norris in 15 and was a Norris Trophy winner in 19. And they had Johnny Gaudreau. The Flames don't have that right now. They don't have anything close to that, in my opinion. Like, Gaudreau was a legit superstar. Giordano was a legit superstar. Yeah. They don't have either of those types of guys right now. And just one other thing I want to bring up, whenever you have that conversation about like team tank and should you blow it up, everyone always points to, oh, well, take a look at Buffalo, or take a look at Ottawa, or, take a look at Detroit. How about you take a look at Stanley Cup champions and some of the best teams in the NHL that have done that? Like, that's what always drives me nuts about that argument is people they'll mention like 3 or 4 teams that have had a hard time through their rebuild, but they failed to mention the Chicago Blackhawks, who won 3 Stanley Cups after bottoming out and taking Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane high in the draft.
100%.
They forget to mention the LA Kings, who drafted Drew Doughty 2nd overall. They forget to mention the Colorado, Washington, Tampa, Florida, and then now there's some up-and-coming teams. Pittsburgh, thank you. Now there's some up-and-coming teams. Edmonton, Toronto, Vancouver, New Jersey. Even like Carolina got Svechnikov 2nd. Dallas got Heiskanen 3rd. Blues got Pietrangelo 4th. Like, all these really good teams have all bottomed out at some point and have built their cores through the draft. But no one ever mentions that when they have that conversation. It's, oh, well, taking and trying to get the 1st overall pick means that you're gonna have poor culture in your team and it's just gonna stay there forever. Well, why didn't it stay there forever for all those teams that I just mentioned? The key is, if you bottom out, you have to hit on those draft picks and you have to have competent management. In my opinion, the teams like the Red Wings under Steve Yzerman, he's done a terrible job in competent management. Buffalo Sabres with Tim Murray and guys before him, incompetent management. Same thing in Ottawa with Pierre Dorion. That guy was one of the worst GMs in all of hockey. Incompetent management. That's the reason why they suck. It's not because they finished in the bottom 5 for a few years and got elite talent. It's because of incompetent management, not being able to surround those guys with good players. Look at Ottawa's core with Stützle, Tkachuk, and Jake Sanderson. That's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal core. If you have a competent manager that can surround those players with other good players, that team's going to be fine. Finishing in the bottom and selecting these guys isn't the reason why they are where they are right now. It's because guys don't know what they're doing. So if the Flames can get 3 or 4 top 10 picks, don't make mistakes and have Craig Conroy be a competent manager, they'll get out of it. They'll get out of that purgatory. I have no doubt about it in my mind. It's just where teams run into trouble is when you have general managers that don't know what they're doing and make mistake after mistake after mistake, and it starts to compound. And then you get to a point where you're Detroit, or you get to a point where you're Buffalo. But if you have a smart GM who's patient and does a really good job drafting, you're going to get out of it. And that always drives me nuts in this conversation is no one ever mentions the teams that have had tons of success after bottoming out. They always just go to their crutch, which is, 3 or 4 teams that have struggled. Like that always bothers me. Like, I don't know if you find the same thing, but the 100%. Flames, they don't need to tear it down to the studs either. Like they don't need to do that. They just need to bottom out for a couple years. And trust me, I mean, as we can see this year, the roster is not very good. They could be a bottom 10 team, and they just make a couple picks, don't make a mistake, and they'll get out of it. Am I out to lunch on that? Am I crazy?
No, because here's how I look at it as well. I think you're spot on there, because for every example of a team that bottoms out and isn't successful, there's one that is successful.
There's like 4 that are successful, not even just one.
There was an interview done over the summer with Elliot Friedman on his podcast that he did with Zetterlund of the San Jose Sharks. And so this is going to, for me, shows that culture matters. He talked about it, him and I think it was William Eklund was with him as well in the same interview, where they were talking to Friedman about how it was hard to go to the rink because they weren't winning, but the culture in the room and the way that Greer, the general manager Greer, and his staff were presenting things to this team is they were actually excited to go to San Jose, to the rink, to work, and to help this team get better, that they're excited to be part of that process of building a roster. San Jose's god-awful. They're terrible. We all can agree to that. That roster is terrible. That team has a long way to go before they're being a playoff team. But the culture that those 2 players on that podcast with Elliot Friedman painted was there was still a positive environment there for them to go and to grow. And that shows that they're developing these players both on and off the ice. They're making these guys professional hockey players. They're making these guys into good men, into good people in the society, in the community. And that team was still showing them that, the results on the ice aren't good results every night, but we're building to something. And so your culture can be controlled through all these people that complain about you don't want a losing culture party. You can control that kind of stuff other ways. They're not promoting the losses in San Jose. What they're promoting is the building of a team that's going to be competitive. And mark my words, San Jose, when they get to that spot with Celebrini and with Will Smith, that is going to be a very good team down the line that a lot of people are going to bemoan San Jose going back to what they were before when they were consistently in the playoffs, because they're building a culture and they're building a roster. So for me, it's more than just tanking and being the worst team. It's tanking / well, now you have to develop what you're bringing, to your point, what you're bringing in, develop those players and develop that culture.
And if you're a Flames fan, don't you want like a guy like Macklin Celebrini on your team?
Yes, please.
He looks phenomenal to start this year. He looks incredible. Like there's talk about him being better than Connor Bedard. Like, don't you want those kinds of guys on your team? Like, as a Flames fan, I certainly do. Mm-hmm. I absolutely do. And if it means going through 2 or 3 seasons where you're not very good, so be it. Because then the next 15 with this guy on your team are going to be so much fun to watch. It's that short-term pain for long-term gain argument.
Yep.
I just don't I don't understand why people don't get the idea of bottoming out for a couple years to get elite talent. I don't understand it.
Me neither. And I had a guy tweet at me the other day, and he was joking around how bad the Flames are, and he was trying to laugh at my team and saying, you guys suck. You're going to be so bottom of the league. I'm like, the things I would do to be the bottom of the league, to have a chance at a Gavin McKenna, to have a chance at a James Hagan, the things that I would do for my team to have those opportunities, because I'm excited for those players, and those players would make me excited to watch my team more. And those players would bring me to the rink. They would bring other fans to the rink, and they would make it exciting again. You ask Flame fans, what would you rather watch? The last 5 years of Jerome McGinley, or the first 5 years without Jerome McGinley before Johnny Gaudreau took over as a superstar? What's more exciting? What brought you to the rink? For me, it was Jerome McGinley. He brought me to the rink. I was excited to watch that team. I want that again, and we just don't have it here. Anything else from you, Robert, on this conversation before we move on here? Because we could go on for hours about building this franchise and about building this team and our thoughts on it. I just hope that the Flames aren't going to chase it like it sounds like if they're gonna be in a good playoff spot. I think this is gonna sound bad. I think the best thing for the Flames right now was that 4-game losing streak. Cool down the expectations, cool down the owner a little bit. This isn't a team ready to compete for the playoffs quite yet. We got pieces, with still ways to go here.
Yeah, just be patient. There's zero rush, zero need to spend assets to bring players in. Even a young top 6 center, I am very against that at this point in time. I think it makes sense maybe 2 or 3 years from now. But for the next couple years, it's stockpile as many picks as possible, draft really well, try not to make too many mistakes, and then you'll really start to see this team take off in a few years. I really believe that. And actually, I really believe that, like, over the next couple years, this team could be really bad. I mean, you take a look at it. What's Nazem Kadri going to be as a 36, 37-year-old? What's Jonathan Huberdeau going to be as a 33, 34-year-old? Coleman's on his way out soon. What's Uyghur going to be when he starts to get into his mid to late 30s? Is Rasmus Anderson going to be around? Like, Michael Backlund, how much longer is Michael Backlund going to be the guy who you can put out in all situations and shut down opposing top lines? Like, a lot of these veteran guys are going to start to take even bigger step backs than they already have. And I don't really see any elite talent coming from any sort of young players. So they could be, not necessarily on purpose, but by accident, they could be really, really bad over the next couple years. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I agree there. And a lot of people are hoping that what we've seen from Dustin Wolf over this first 10-game stretch from him is what he is for his NHL career. That very well could fade out real quick. We all remember Steve Mason or Matt Murray. They all started really, really hot and faded out. So we got to temper expectations as well for what we have in goal. So a lot of these guys could be taking some steps backwards, and there is no one coming. When people are online clamoring for Roy Cairns to come in here to get a look at him, it's not looking all that great for the Flames here. So build it, Conroy and Murray. Please, for heaven's sakes, have a little bit of patience and let the plan happen. All right. We talk about team building. Before we go here, we wanted to give our 4 Nations Team Canada rosters to you, the listeners here, before they come out officially on Wednesday from the NHL. Robert, I'm going to let you go first on this one because I really want to see how you went about building your Team Canada, whether you do it forward. I got lines. I don't know how you did it, but I actually built lines for my roster. Interesting to see who you pick forward-wise for Team Canada here.
Okay, yeah, I built some lines too. I guess the way I'll present it is I'll talk about the guys who have not been like officially named to the team. So you have like Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Brad Marchand, Cale Makar, and Braden Point, I think, are the 6 guys that have already been named.
Correct.
So we obviously don't need to talk about that. So some of the other guys I have on the team, maybe I'll name them and I'll see if you have them too. And then where we have differences, maybe we can have a little bit of a debate. How does that sound?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so I got Mitch Marner on the team.
Mitch Marner, I do too.
Sam Reinhart.
Yep.
Mark Stone.
Easy.
He's a slam dunk for me.
Yeah.
If he's healthy, he's there 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
Mark Scheifele.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. How about Travis Konechny?
I think this is where we're going to start differing, Robert.
Okay. Do you have Konechny?
I do have Konechny.
To me, he's also slam dunked. He's been incredible this season. Like, not only is he over a point per game, but he's an asshole to play against. He's physical. He has an attitude. Uh-huh. Like, I really, really like Travis Konechny for this team. All right, let's see if we get a little bit different here. Anthony Cirelli.
Nope.
Ooh, okay, there we go. So there's the first one. So I have Cirelli as like a 4th line center, kind of a guy that can play like on like a defensive shutdown line. So I have him with Mark Stone and Brandon Hagel as a 4th line. Do you have Hagel on the team?
All right, that's where we differ a little bit. I wondered about Hagel because of the coach, because of who's going to be coaching this roster. I think right there you might have it on me when the team comes out. So I have him as my first guy out of the roster, but my 13th forward could be the guy that misses in favor of Hagel.
And who do you? So give me the bottom of your roster. Oh, and the other guy that I have at the bottom of the roster is Robert Thomas from St. Louis. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the NHL.
I like
in the NHL.
Okay, so the one guy that I'll mention here, I actually have him on the top of my roster. I have him alongside Crosby and McKinnon for a line, and that's Alexis Lafreniere. I really like what he's brought for the Rangers this year. He's found a scoring touch. He's found another level. He's used to playing with elite guys where he plays in New York. I think he's a really good fit alongside a guy like Crosby. So I have Alexis Lafreniere. And at the bottom of my roster, this is a guy that he's a big ball of hate. And I think he can do the Marchand role, but better than Marchand at this point of his career. And that's Tom Wilson. I really like what Tom Wilson brings. And he, again, plays with elite players. I think he can be a really good fourth line guy. A big penalty killer for Washington as well, which is why I took him. The debate for me was between Wilson and Cirelli, and I just took Wilson. Because I have Scheifele as a fourth line center. And then my 13th forward was a guy who I take because strictly on what's coming after. The Olympics is coming after this event, right? Next year in 26. So I took Connor Bedard there to get him the experience of being around these guys in preparation for the Olympics in 2016.
Yeah, but so what does that do? What is having Connor Bedard just hanging out being a 13th forward do?
Well, I think he plays still, right? He's still a guy with a ton of skill. So for me, I always bet on skill. That anyone who knows me knows I bet on skill. I still think he can provide a lot in an offense around all these other guys. I think he can learn from guys like Sidney Crosby how to be part of these smaller tournaments, these quick turnarounds. So I like him there. I understand those who don't have him there because his year hasn't been all that great, but he's still going to be a guy that I think Team Canada leans on come 2026.
But if he's a 13th forward, like does a 13th forward even dress for this tournament, or are there 12? Like, that's kind of what I'm wondering. And even if he is the 13th forward, what's he going to play, like 3 or 4 minutes a night, maybe get a little bit of power play time? And just to me, like the goal for this tournament, this is just me speaking, is to win. Like, I want Team Canada to win this tournament.
Yep.
I don't think having Bedard with the player he is this season right now helps them win the tournament, in my opinion. I think guys like Hagel would. I think guys like Cirelli would. Mark Stone, even a guy like Robert Thomas, who's older and more experienced. I think those guys help them win the tournament. I just don't get what is Bedard going to get out of the tournament that's going to help him in the Olympics? Because it's not an Olympic event. It's not like you're like at the Village or anything like that. It's like a week-long tournament. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. This is also the same conversation we had when Bedard was named 13th forward at the World Junior Championships. I know it's a different circumstance, but we also had this conversation. He was named 13th forward at the World Junior Championships and ended up being top line player by the end of the tournament. Different scenario, I get it, of course, but that shows the growth that Connor Bedard could have. So this guy could start as the 13th forward, and by game 3, he's playing on your second line with, say, Crosby and McKinnon or whoever it might be on that second line. A guy who could potentially take the spot of a Brad Marchand, who's been absolutely, I will say it, he's been absolutely terrible for Boston this year. If Brad Marchand wasn't already on this roster, named before the season began, he would not have made my roster this time around. I would have had no problem putting a Cirelli or a Hagel in there over top of Brad Marchand. So I think he has the opportunity here to go and be part of this team, to learn from Crosby, learn from these guys, and potentially be a factor down the line for Canada. I know it's a short tournament, but by game 3 or 2 or 3, he could potentially be part of that top 6.
Yeah. You could also make the complete opposite argument. Like, he went to the World Championships last spring. He was supposed to be the guy on the team, and he ended up, barely even getting any ice time come the end of the tournament. So it could go either way, right? Which, I mean, this is why having this debate is so much fun, because there's so many different permutations, combinations for this team. How about, can you run through your lines? I want to hear your lines.
I do love that Hagel thing, though. I really do think that at the end of the day, he gets in because of the coach. So my lines that I put together, I have Lafreniere with Crosby and McKinnon. I have McDavid between Marner and Reinhart. I have Braden Point between Stone and Marchand. And then I have Scheifele with Wilson and Konechny. Oh, did we lose Robert?
I lost you for a second there. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Oh, yep. Sorry. I think we're good. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I liked those. Those are pretty solid lines. I like those. The one thing I thought was interesting when putting together this team is how is just how like little depth there is with left shots. It seems like a lot of the talent among Canadian forwards, they're all righties, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll do my lines quickly. I have McDavid, McKinnon, Marner as a top line, and I have McDavid on the wing because he's a lefty, and there's not a lot of, like I said, there's not a lot of left-handed wingers on this team. So I love the idea of putting McDavid on the left wing with McKinnon at center, Marner on the right wing. I think that line could be incredible, and just McDavid and McKinnon playing together would be so much fun.
Oh yeah.
And then I have kind of a solid line that you can put out in any situation. I got Konechny with Crosby and Reinhart. And then third line, similar sort of thing, Marchand, Braden Point, Robert Thomas. And then a fourth line, sort of shutdown, checking line of Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, Mark Stone. And then Mark Scheifele as the extra forward. And I mean, you could put Scheifele in for Robert Thomas. You could put him in for Brad Marchand. There's lots of different places you could put him in the lineup as well. So, I mean, regardless of who Team Canada takes, the team's going to be absolutely loaded. It's going to be stacked. And I'm personally super excited for this tournament. I can't wait to watch it.
I'm excited to watch McKinnon and McDavid on the same team.
It'll be so much fun.
That's going to be so intriguing to watch. That Canadian power play, that top unit, is going to be absolutely incredible to see who they put there. But it's going to be Harlem Globetrotter-esque type of a group there. So I'm excited for it as well. Let's move on to the defense here, Robert. I think we're going to have a lot of the similar players on the defense based on who's available for Team Canada, but I'm very intrigued to hear the bottom part of your defense and who you got as your seventh defender. Let's hear your defense.
Okay, so and this is just my opinion, I think that there's 5 locks to make this team.
Me too.
And that's Makar, Taves, Shea Theodore, Alex Pietrangelo, and Josh Morrissey. Do you have the same 5?
Bang on with me. Yeah, same 5 for me. Yep.
Nice. So then now we have the 6-7, and they're both kind of on the right side. And for the third pairing right side D, I have Chris Tanev.
Oh.
What do you think of that?
That's out of left field for me, not to lie, but I don't hate it.
Because to me, Tanev is one of, if not the best, defensive defenseman in the NHL. Everywhere he goes, he dominates. Like if you take a look at all those underlying numbers, his team badly outchances, badly outscores the opposition. He's great at suppressing offense. He's a great penalty killer. He'll block shots. Like he'll do everything that you need him to do. This Team Canada team already has a ton of skill and puck moving and offense on this defense group. Yep. They're kind of missing that like pure defensive shutdown guy. And I think Chris Tanev is like literally the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. And I think that he should be in that type of role for Team Canada. So I have him as my 6. Who is your 6?
I like that a lot. I really like that a lot, and I like that reasoning. My 6th, I have Noah Dobson. I don't think he gets enough love playing in New York and what he does, but I really like he can skate, he can move the puck, and to your point, he defends quite well for what he brings to the table, and I think he could be a very good D partner for a guy like Josh Morrissey as well. So I have Noah Dobson as my number 6.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't go wrong with him either. Very, very good player. I wouldn't be upset if either him or Tanev made the team. And then for the 7th D, I'm assuming we probably both have the same guy. This is a Calgary Flames podcast.
I bet we don't have the same guy.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going Mackenzie Weegar. Who are you going with?
See, my debate was between Dobson or Weegar, and I went with Dobson on that one. I love Weegar. Everyone who listens to the podcast knows I adore Mackenzie Weegar. But I debated between Mackenzie Weegar and another guy, and I leaned towards this other guy because of what I saw on social media this morning. I think Travis Sanheim makes Team Canada. I think Travis Sanheim brings some of that defense that we're kind of missing with some of these guys. I think he plays a very strong game in front of his own net, and he can penalty kill. He's the top penalty killer in Philadelphia, and he does a lot for that group there. So I think Travis Sanheim makes Team Canada, and so I made the switch from Mackenzie Weegar to Travis Sanheim, and you can send the hate on social media to @VintageJohnny84 wherever you want. I'm on all the platforms, and I'll listen to it because it was hard taking Mackenzie Weegar off of my defense.
In the limited viewings I've had of the Flyers this season, like I've watched probably 3 to 5-ish games of theirs. Sanheim's been the one guy who's always stood out and been super impressive to me. So actually, I really like that pick. I think it makes sense. And I like that it's different. There's not a ton of people out there putting him on their team, kind of similar to Chris Tanev. So I like that we have a little bit of difference there when putting together our squads.
I'm sure the Leaf fans are going to come at me now saying, "Why didn't you put Riley on that list?" But for me,
no.
Travis Sanheim is miles better defensively than Riley is.
Yeah, Morgan Riley. I have him listed as I have outside looking in kind of honorable mentions, and Morgan Riley's at the end of the list of defensemen for me. He does not make this team.
Yeah.
And then for Mackenzie Weegar, just to make a little bit of a case for him, I like the fact that he can play both sides. That you're not going to have that with every 7th defenseman, and you can put him out in pretty much any situation, and I think he'll be fine. He's not particularly great at one specific skill. He's just very good at everything. Yeah. And I think that's really good for a 7th defenseman on a team like this. And then also, I actually think he'd also be really good culture wise. He's an absolute beauty. This guy is a legend. I think he's the type of guy that could help bring together a team in such a short tournament. I think he's the type of person and personality that could do something like that. And I do think that matters in these situations. So I really like that. I like how we have some different options there, but man, I really don't think Chris Tanev's getting enough love for this team. We've seen it in the past when, I remember Dan Hamhuis got put on the 2014 team as kind of a defensive specialist. And I think Tanev could play a similar role.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I'll give you my goaltenders first on this one here, because I think we might have some same ones, but my third goaltender is different, and I'll give you reasonings for my third guy as well as it. So I have Jordan Binnington. There's just too much smoke for there not to be fire with his name around Team Canada. I have Hill going as well. I think he can in all situations. And my third guy is Marc-Andre Fleury. Now this guy is having a better season than people predicted. This talk of Canada has no good goaltenders is hogwash for me because of Marc-Andre Fleury. He now has 566 NHL career wins. This year, he is now 5-0-1 on the season, a 2.65 goals against average, and a 906 save percentage. Those are tidy numbers given his age as well. He can be a veteran guy, a third guy. He's not going to ruffle your feathers, and he can pick up the slack if either of the other two guys falters. I love taking Marc-Andre Fleury. He's been there before. He's played big spots for Canada before, and I think he could be a nice safety net for the other two guys.
Yeah, I mean, as the third goalie, I mean, I don't hate that, and kind of like what we just talked about with Mackenzie Weegar being a culture guy, Marc-Andre Fleury is that in spades, right?
Yep.
And he does bring that experience factor to international events. So in the grand scheme of things, it's a third goalie in a 4 or 5 game tournament. Probably not going to get any ice time anyway. So
he's also an elite prankster, and you're going to need that kind of fun stuff in a short tournament like this.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I have the same starting and backup goalie as you. So I go Binnington and Hill. And then my third goalie be Logan Thompson. He's been very good in Washington this year. He's 10-1-1, got a 911 save percentage, 2.56 goals against average. He's been probably one of, if not the biggest reason for Washington's success this year.
Mm-hmm.
Been really, really impressed with him. And he's a Calgary kid. He's got the Mika Kiprusoff skulls on his mask. I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So a little bit of a Calgary connection there for the Flames podcast here. So the goaltending is the weak spot on the team, obviously. There's no elite guy. And if you were to put, say, Jordan Binnington as a starter, comparing him to all the other starters across the tournament, he's clearly the worst, unfortunately. But Canada, they're going to have to probably pull like a 2014 and end up playing a really strong defensive game in front of their goalie and try to probably win games 2-1 and 3-2. That's kind of the way I see things going here.
But we got the right coach for it. I really think John Cooper was a good choice to lead this group. He's had Tampa Bay winning in a lot of scenarios in a lot of different ways. Yes, he had Vasilevsky, but you got to remember, before Vasilevsky got there, he was doing a lot of this winning with other goaltenders. He had a lot of success before he had 88 in goal there. So this is a guy who knows how to win with group of veterans, with all-star players, and I think he's the right guy to lead this group. So I really like the setup for Team Canada. All they need is good enough goaltending. They don't need this elite goaltending. And you got to remember as well, the U.S. might have Hellebuck, but when has Hellebuck ever won the big game as well? So it could work against you as well. Robert, you got to pick a team. Are we going to be homers here and say Canada wins this tournament, or are you going to be Elliot Friedman on the podcast and go elsewhere?
I'll go Team Canada wins. There's too much talent. I think they have the best three players in hockey in McDavid, McKinnon, and Makar. Some people might say Quinn Hughes might be up there for defensemen, but I think they got three of the best players in the tournament, tons of depth, great defense. I really think that they're going to end up winning this thing.
Yeah, me too. I look at players that know how to win, and you look at these rosters, and yes, the Americans have a very nice setup, but Team Canada has more guys that know how to win. Multiple cups on that forward group, the multiple cups on the defensive group, multiple cups in goal if they take the goalies that we've picked. And these are guys that know how to win. These are guys that have been there and done that before. The other teams, very nice rosters, but do they know how to win? And in the short tournament, that's going to be quite interesting to watch how this tournament unfolds.
It's a great point. And when I take a look at the American team specifically, I see a ton of talent and I see a lot of offensive firepower, but I don't know if I see the complete players. Mm-hmm. When you take a look at Canada, you got McDavid, McKinnon, Marner. Marner was a Selke candidate and he's a great penalty killer. Reinhardt's a great 200-foot player. Point, Crosby, Konechny, Marchand, Cirelli, Hagel, Stone. All these guys are excellent 200-foot players on top of being incredibly skilled as it is. So I like the makeup of Canada's team better than just the individual talent of the Americans. I think that's going to be a big difference.
My one bold prediction for this tournament will be the Americans will find their backup goaltender before Canada uses their backup goaltender. That's my bold prediction for this tournament. If you've listened or followed me on social media, you guys know I'm not a big Hellebuck guy. And so when it comes to a tournament like this, you need him to be the guy for 4 or 5 games here and be good for it. Got to do it in order for me to believe in you, and he hasn't done it yet. As well, you've seen both Binnington, Hill, and my guy Fleury have all done it, where they've had stretches where they've won cups at the end of those stretches. So I believe in these guys, even if they're not the elite names of the Brodeurs of the Wall of the past. I still believe in these guys to give you good enough goaltending that you can be successful. And I think that's all you're going to need here with that firepower Team Canada is going to bring to the table. Robert, anything else from you before we sign off here? Once again, we've decided to go ahead and just make this the longest podcast in the history of the world for 2 weeks in a row. So thank you for sticking with us, Robert. Anything else before we sign off here? And what's coming up on Flames Nation from you?
No, I mean, I will say I am super, super excited for this Four Nations face-off. I know there's a lot of people out there who are pretty skeptical of it, but I cannot wait to have best-on-best hockey back. And the key for the NHL is consistency. I really think they have to consistently be playing their players at international events in order for them to actually matter. If they're planning on bringing back the World Cup of Hockey, make sure that you have it ready to go for the next 10 years. Every second year, there's going to be a World Cup of Hockey sort of thing, or every fourth year, there'll be a World Cup of Hockey along with Olympics. That way, people will actually be invested in it. Not just hey, it's 2004, we'll do one. All right, it's 2016, we'll do one. It's no. Every 4 years, there should be a World Cup of Hockey, and that way it'll actually be legitimized. Sorry. It'll be a hockey tournament that people will be very, very excited to watch. So
that's how you grow the game.
100%. And every second year, it should be Olympics, World Cup, Olympics, World Cup. Do that forever. Do not stop that calendar, because that brings back legitimacy to international hockey. And I love that.
I agree. Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Find Robert on your social media at Ring of Fire CGY. I'm at Vintage Johnny 84 on all of those platforms. Follow us, and thank you for following the show. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and smash that 5-star review button wherever you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else. We appreciate you joining us this week again for another episode of the Red Mile Rundown. Enjoy the games this week, and we'll see you next week on the show.